blackmail, scandal, attempted murder, and a wrongfully imprisoned man set the tone for this episode, my friends. Today we're going to dissect an unexplained mystery which has kept people wondering for decades what really happened in Circleville, Ohio in 1976. We all can dread getting mail, especially if we're expecting an expensive invoice, but these were no ordinary letters, but threats. Now, Circleville, Ohio is a very small town which sits 25 miles south of Columbus and is best known for its annual pumpkin show. Mary and Ron Gillispie seemed to have the perfect happy family, but that all changed one morning when Mary received a threatening letter, with the author knowing personal information about her family and life. The envelope was marked Columbus, Ohio, with no return address. Inside, the letter accused Mary of having an affair with a man called Gordon Massey, who was the superintendent of the school she worked for as a bus driver. The writer told her that the affair had better stop. They knew where she lived, that she had children, and had been observing her house. It ended by saying, "This is no joke. Please take it serious." There was no signature from who this horrible note came from, leaving Mary with a feeling of anxiety and the need to look over her shoulder. A week later, a second letter arrived, which repeated the same tone as the first. Terrified, she kept the letters to herself, not daring to share her concerns with her husband Ron. But the next letter could not be ignored, as it was addressed to Ron himself, and he was told that if he didn't stop the affair, that his life would be in danger. It makes you wonder though, what caused someone to feel so passionately about this couple? What did it matter to them if Mary was or not having an affair? Stuff happens behind closed doors that is none of our business. But to this writer, it was very personal. Maybe they had been cheated on themselves, or possibly someone that believed their marriage was a holy agreement that was being disrespected. Whatever the case, the next letter that Ron received was scary as hell. It said, "Gillispie, you've had 2 weeks and done nothing. Make her admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBS, posters, signs and billboards until the truth comes out." Now at this point, the couple had only told 3 people about the notes, and they were Ron's sister and her husband, Paul Freshour, and Paul's sister. Together, they made a plan. They thought they had an idea of who it might be, so sent 4 or 5 letters to the person. They enclosed no evidence, but wanted them to know they were onto them. All seemed calm for a while as the letters stopped. But on August 19th, 1999, when Mary was away in Florida, Ron received a phone call that sent him into a fury. Local journalist Martin Yant stated he told his children he was going out to confront the letter writer. He took his weapon, he did not seem to be drunk, he said goodbye to his children and went out. Now while angry, upset and armed, Ron drove the family's red and white pickup headed to a destination that we are unsure of. Yant continued by saying within a short distance, at an intersection that he knew very well, he lost control of the vehicle, hit a tree and was killed. Somewhere in between leaving the house and hitting that tree, his gun had fired 1 shot, and there was never any explanation for when or how, at whom, that gun could have been fired. When the police arrived, they found the gun under his body. Had it fallen from his pocket? Or maybe it had been placed there and the crash set up. No one knows, as the scene was apparently not investigated too deeply, as after ruling out one potential suspect, they classed it as an accident. The strange thing about this is how much the sheriff started to change his mind over the investigation, and soon residents of Circleville were receiving letters accusing the sheriff of a cover-up. Paul Freshour stated, "The sheriff agreed with me that there was foul play, and then, when I contacted him again, he changed his attitude completely. Then he was telling me that it wasn't foul play, that the suspect had passed a polygraph test. So, one suspect is cleared, but does it not still warrant further investigation?" Ron is said to have had a 0.16% alcohol in his blood, which in Ohio would be 1.5 times the legal limit. But he was known to be a light drinker, with some saying he was teetotal. So these findings alone were surprising to many. Also, was his death an accident or staged? Was he really drunk that night, or had somebody done something to force the alcohol in his system? And who had he fired the gun at? Even after Ron's death, the written abuse to Mary continued, which resulted in a startling turnaround. Mary finally admitted to the affair with Gordon Massey, but claims it only began after her husband's death. I will state now, I honestly feel that is crap. Yeah, sure, you might take comfort with someone, but the guy you were accused of having an affair with? Seriously? I would have thought that would be the one person you would stay away from at all costs. Somehow, after the announcement, she managed to keep her job, which really pissed the writer off, as ultimately that seemed to have been their goal. On February 7th, 1983, Mary was driving her bus route when she noticed a sign at the side of the road targeting Mary's 13-year-old daughter. Enough was enough. Mary leapt from the bus and tried to pull the sign down from the fence, but in doing so noticed that it was rigged with twine and a box. She took it all with her onto the bus, and when she got home later, opened the package. Here she noticed that it had been a booby trap designed to shoot her when she pulled at the signage. Luckily for Mary, it had malfunctioned. Investigators noticed that someone had tried to rub off the serial number of the small pistol, but Ohio's Bureau of Criminal Investigation managed to retrieve it, and that is when the next bombshell hit. It belonged to Paul Freshour. Paul said, "I admitted the gun was mine, but I hadn't seen it for a long time. I had no reason to check up on it for anything, and I don't know when it had come up missing." On February 25th, 1983, Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe asked Paul to do a handwriting test, but this was not carried out in the official way. Yant explained, this is not the proper way to test to see if someone has a certain writing style, because if they're copying from a letter, they're going to try and emulate the style. And the experts said that the testing was improper, so they didn't really say that these letters were written by Paul Freshour. They said that they could have been. Paul was charged with attempted murder and placed on a $50,000 cash bond. On October 24th, 1983, Paul went on trial for the attempted murder of his sister-in-law, where the letters were used against him, with a handwriting expert stating he believed Paul to have written the envelopes, documents and postcards, along with Paul's boss, testifying that he had not been in work on the day of the booby trap. The evidence seemed all against him. Paul never took the stand in his own defence to explain his solid alibi for the day in question, and this was a decision he would later regret. He was found guilty of attempted murder and given the maximum sentence of 7 to 25 years. So the guilty party was behind bars, and now the whole town could breathe a big sigh of relief. But the letters didn't stop. But how could this be if Paul was in prison? Sheriff Radcliffe decided to get firm on the matter and talk to the warden of the prison about the ongoing situation. Paul was placed in solitary confinement, but guess what? The letters continued. Also, they were still marked Columbus, even though Paul was imprisoned across the state in Lima. After many investigations, it is said the warden did not believe that Paul was writing the letters and even wrote to his now ex-wife to state the same. After 7 years in prison, Paul was rejected parole due to how many letters were still being sent, even though he was a model prisoner. Only a few days later, after his hearing, Paul received his own letter and it read, "Now, when are you going to believe you aren't going to get out of there? I told you 2 years ago. When we set 'em up, they stay set up. Don't you listen at all?" One thing that rings out to me, though, is that statement, "I told you 2 years ago." Does that mean a letter or visitor came to Paul and stated the sentiment then, that he would never be released? If so, why is this not mentioned? It also states the term "we." Does that mean that more than one person was involved? Yant managed to review the sheriff's file and discovered that there was plenty of evidence that could have possibly cleared Paul, not entered at the trial. Yant said Mary Gillispie told the sheriff one of the other bus drivers told her that she had been driving the same road about 20 minutes before Mary Gillispie found the booby trap at exactly the site. And when she went by that very same intersection, there was a yellow El Camino parked there. A large man with sandy hair was standing there. When he saw her, he turned around and acted like he was going to the bathroom or something, but seemed also to be avoiding any kind of identification. The description of the individual does not fit Paul Freshour at all, and Paul had a very solid alibi for this time. There was no attempt at all to follow up on that lead. After serving 10 years in prison, Paul was finally released and still maintains that he is innocent and wants the real criminal found. He wants nothing more than answers so that maybe he can find closure for all that he went through himself. In December 1993, the television show Unsolved Mysteries was going to cover the story when they received a postcard that stood out from the rest of the mail. It said, "Forget Circleville, Ohio. If you come to Ohio, you else sickos will pay. Signed, the Circleville writer." Now, after Paul's release, the letters finally stopped. Was it because they had not gotten the end result that they so desired? Who knows? But the questions still remain. Who was the author of these horrible letters? How did Ron Gillispie come to die? Was it an accident or murder? And who set up the booby trap for Mary? What do you think happened in Circleville, Ohio? Let me know in the comments below.